Powering Africa remains an elusive dream despite the fact that economic growth will not be achieved without sufficient and reliable electricity. 50-plus years later, much of the continent struggles to keep its lights on. We seek answers from the Energy Indaba in South Africa. Hello and welcome to Global Business. I am Penina Karibe in Nairobi. There's plenty coming up tonight, including the following stories. Gambia's business reforms pay off 50 years after independence. And consumer survey reveals grim truths about the sacrifices Zimbabweans make to stretch their hard-earned dollars. The lack of proper statistics is emerging among issues standing in the way of the continent addressing its power shortage. Delegates at the ongoing Africa Energy Indaba in South Africa point out that many countries lack proper data on the capacity needed to power their economies, as well as how much is lost in outages and so on. As Angela Coppola now reports, if you can't measure it, you can't plan to properly fix the problem.
It's a truism that you can't measure how well a country is doing economically until you've got proper statistics. And this also applies to measuring the damage that is done when a country doesn't have consistent power supply.
In a country like South Africa, you have some progress that have been made in determining the statistics in the economy. But when you go to these other African countries, the statistics service is not very much developed as we see it here.
You need good statistics to be able to carry out such estimations of the impact of the lack of electricity on your economy. And in the particular case of Uganda, we don't have very good statistics as well.
Zimbabwe is a case in point. The regulator there relies on company annual reports to determine what kind of impact intermittent or non-delivery of electricity actually has. Zimbabwe, like most other countries, sees diesel costs at around 3 times more than what can be supplied by the national grid.
Basically, what we see as an impact of intermittent or insufficient power is the issue that the production costs will tend to go up because the use of diesel generators costs more, and also we believe that the cost of unsaved energy is even much higher.
The cost of lack of electricity in a country like Uganda has been quantified. If you're on the grid, you're paying around 20 cents per kilowatt hour. As soon as the grid goes down, those energy costs jump to around 51 cents per kilowatt hour.
Every 1% reduction in electricity supply, you may see a 0.25 reduction in GDP.
It's estimated that South Africa has lost around 1% of GDP every year since 2008 because of inconsistent and intermittent power supply. The rest of the continent is also suffering from similar percentage losses, and hopefully things will start changing as countries start working together to generate power together. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Johannesburg.
All right, so let's get more now from Angelo Coppola. He joins us live from Johannesburg. So, Angelo, what solutions to the consistent power problems are coming out of the Energy Indaba?
Well, Penina, it's really more of the same. All of the delegates, all of the speakers were talking about certainty of policy. They're talking about certainty of legislative frameworks and, interestingly, talking about contract enforcement and trust. It seems that trust is becoming more of an issue, and we heard today of one minister voicing his concern that he wasn't prepared to go into a cross-border agreement with another government because he didn't trust them. They want to do cross-border deals, we're told, but the trust is lacking. It's similar to the business people who want to provide solutions, but they need certainty that, first of all, they're going to get paid and that they're going to get paid on time and every time. Penina?
Yeah, but Angelo, we've heard a lot of talk about these solutions, but not much action. Is this another talking shop, or is there real commitment to act?
The honest truth, I would guess, would be that it is another talk shop. There is some commitment to act, but the private sector, as usual, is coming across quite frustrated. They're saying that they're ready, but government moves very slowly. Regulations aren't changing quickly enough for them to be able to get those projects online and running, and you need that change. One solution, though, that did pop up during the course of the conference was to use new mines that are opening in remote areas of any particular country and turn them into micro transmission systems, because there's generally no power infrastructure in those remote areas. And when the mine does come on stream and starts generating its own power, it can probably plug into the network or to the grid and provide some excess power. So this is seen as a potential solution to get around the regulatory frameworks that are operating in particular countries right now. Penina?
And Angelo, Africa has great resources in terms of wind power and solar, but it's yet to tap into these resources with the perennial excuse of financing. Can the Africa Rising narrative be realized under such circumstances?
Well, in terms of solar, bear in mind that solar only works during the day. Wind generally also only works during daylight hours, and people use power 24 hours a day. The issue here really is around the energy storage technology that's needed. We're told during the course of today's conference that the technology is kind of available, it's there, but it has to be close to the source or to where the power is generated from. The bottom line here is that base load is key. Proper power stations are the key to solving some of the country's problems. There is talk of micro power stations as one solution, but you ask whether the Africa Rising narrative can be realized. I think so, but it's not going to work within the current thought processes. Another solution we heard today is off-grid power, which is your solar power, but more in a local residential area as opposed to tapping into a grid. Penina?
Now, Angelo, President Obama's Power Africa initiative featured in discussions there. Why is this one also taking too long to be realized?
Well, the strange thing here is that about 3 weeks ago, there were still discussions happening in the US in how this initiative is going to actually work. Some good news, though, that what didn't happen at the conference, but Tanzania recently, a couple of days ago, announced that an initiative to provide 1 million homes with reliable solar power. And this is based on the Obama initiative, and they're planning to have these 1 million houses fitted with solar power by 2017. It's getting funding from various groups. But back to the Indaba, it was discussed. In fact, it had its own session. It was fairly well attended. Bureaucracy was raised as an issue again. And bear in mind that all the will in the world is not going to get a government to move faster than they generally do. Funding remains the key discussion point, as we've said. And bear in mind, you can announce a plan, but getting governments to adopt it and implement it is a completely different issue altogether. Penina?
All right, Angela, let's leave it there for now. Thanks very much for those insights. Angela Kupla live for us in Johannesburg. Now, the Gambia turned 50 on Wednesday as its leader got a thumbs up for reforming the country since entering power in 1994. One of the areas that is recording success is tourism, but was badly hit by Ebola. CCTV's Jean Kerr reports that it may take a long time before the sector recovers.
This should be the busiest time of the year for Abdul Demba. This area, Kololi, is a hotspot for tourists from Europe, and the Sand Swing Resort is popular. Not now, though. The resort's been closed for the past 3 months, a victim of the Ebola outbreak.
We closed the hotel on the 17th of November 2014. The last day on the 17th we were closing, we have less than 15 guests in our hotel. So you see how bad it was. So with 15 guests, you cannot gain anything out of it. You just have to give them up.
Well, Gambia, which is entirely surrounded by Senegal, is yet to record a single Ebola case. But the impact of the virus in the region has had a crippling effect on tourism, which is the principal foreign exchange earner. Tourism accounts for around 16% of Gambia's GDP, and 40,000 jobs depend on it, around 1/5 of the country's workforce. In a normal year, 200,000 visitors will flock to the country. The government predicts numbers this year could drop by up to 60%.
It may take 2-3 seasons, for us to forget about Ebola completely. Are we fearful? I wouldn't say we are fearful. Are we concerned? Yes, we are concerned.
Some tourists have made the journey.
Even my family say you are crazy to go. My son. I said, I'm still going. Why not?
Lots of people in the Netherlands don't notice how far it is, how many kilometers it is between here, the safe place, and the place where the Ebola is.
but the numbers need to recover quickly. Abdul Demba feels lucky still to have a job. 150 of his colleagues at the Sunswing are out of work. Jean Keo, CCTV, Banjul, Gambia.
All right, so let's discuss the Gambia's prospects further. Mariam Bamad is live for us in London. Mariam, how are foreign investors viewing Gambia? Is it an attractive destination?
Well, investors have mixed views about Gambia. Up until 2009, its success story was because of the $18 million Gateway project in coordination with the World Bank, a key component of the government's strategy for achieving broad-based, export-oriented, and of course sustained growth. We have to remember that the agriculture sector and tourism attract most of the FDI, especially with partners like India, Lebanon, the UK, and of course Libya as well. But its smaller size and landlocked positions also very much impede on large-scale investments, and that's what many investors are looking at. And some analysts told me that they're also very critical that the government isn't actually managing the spending very efficiently, with corruption in sectors like property rights and a lack of judicial systems. In fact, the World Bank lowered its ranking of Gambia, the country, at 150th in its spot. Doing business, for around the world, doing business report last year actually pushed down 2 spots since 2012. So it has actually come down 2 spots because of a lack of government incentives, if you will.
And Mariam, President Jammeh introduced reforms when he came to power in 1994. How are these reforms being viewed from your end?
Not as great as many had expected. It's been a goal for more than a decade for the government to make Gambia attractive to both domestic and international investors. That's what the reforms were meant to do, but investors are not as keen and they're not very much open to them. Analysts say that there are almost no limits on foreign ownership or control of businesses, which is great, of course, in many sectors, which makes Gambia a lucrative spot for investors. But at the same time, the recent Ebola outbreak, for example, has very much dampened some incentive. And the government is really trying to make its economy more competitive by offering new incentives like developing local assets to become marketable and more attractive for businesses. By boosting things like taxes, the government's trying to spend more money on strengthening the labor market and strengthening within that domestic demand as well. But how much that will actually cater to outside investors, we've yet to see.
Well, so what's the forecast for Gambia's economy this year, Mariam?
Well, the common expectation is that the economy will grow by about 6.7% this year. Analysts say the government needs to control domestic borrowing and create a more sustainable framework for growth by moving away from overcrowding in the private sector activity that we've been seeing and put money in public spending and the labor market. Also, in order to maintain economic growth, many are saying that the government should strive to maintain a flexible exchange rate policy and to tighten monetary fiscal policies and really ensure the stability that we need to see within foreign reserve levels as well.
All right, Mariam Bamad, live for us there in London. Thanks, Mariam, for joining us. Now let's go through the markets now. South African stocks ended slightly low on Wednesday, with Sasol taking the most points of the index after the petrochemical giant said it was preparing to cut its dividend payout. The JSE Top 40 index was down 0.53% at 46,465, and the broader all-share index was off 0.56% at 52,536. Still ahead, Cairo's next big thing, the ambitious eco-friendly project that breaks ground next month. And the Nigerian entrepreneur who has found an answer to Nigeria's housing woes in shipping containers.
Africa is on the move. 77 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
this is the first year that Africa will have more foreign direct investment than aid. And it's like the tipping point in terms of changing the way the continent is perceived. And I think this summit very much responds to that call. Now, whether it can materialize what is being announced is something that we'll have to check and see whether it happens.
You're watching Global Business. Welcome back. A survey by the Zimbabwe National Statistics Agency has revealed that close to 76% of the country's 7 million adult population lives on less than $200 a month. 44% are forced to skip a meal compared to 29% 4 years ago. The consumer survey results released by Finmark, a South African-based entity, indicates that while the number of adults without income had decreased over the years, a vast majority earn less than $100 a month. CCTV's Farai Mokutuya with the details.
The tight economic situation is making the going tougher for the average Zimbabwean.
You need to understand the events of the last 2 years. What we have had in this economy are massive company closures and retrenchments. A lot of people have lost their jobs.
And that has pushed many of them onto the streets to try and eke out a living. According to some estimates, there are as many as 20,000 informal traders and vendors in Harare's central business district. When I spoke to some of them, they confirmed that the cost of living is indeed up.
Most people have now turned to vending, but you don't make enough to cover expenses. People are living from hand to mouth. As long as they can manage to put some food on the table, that's all.
The survey indicates the number of adult Zimbabweans with no source of income has decreased, though they still face challenges. According to calculations from the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, a family of 6 requires about $138 a month just on groceries. If you factor in rent, utilities and transport, that figure could go up to as high as $300. Out of the reach of many formerly employed here, where an average civil servant takes home less than $300 per month. But there is a ray of hope. Government is pursuing an economic turnaround plan which is getting a huge boost from renewed interest from a number of international investors who could pour their money here. The plan promises to reignite local industries and create 2 million jobs, which is what most people you speak to here want. That will significantly lower the number of people selling their wares on pavements and street corners. Farai Mokutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
An ambitious, eco-friendly project containing 1,000 apartments is to be built in the Heliopolis district of Cairo. Architect Vincent Callebaut's plans for the Gate residence will feature solar panels, wind turbines and heating tubes. The complex will cover 4.8 million square feet, the equivalent of 450,000 square meters, and will generate energy savings upwards of 50%, as well as significantly decrease the local carbon footprint.
Cairo probably isn't the first city where you would expect to see a multi-billion-dollar eco-complex, but that is set to be a reality within just 4 years, thanks to futuristic plans designed by Belgian-born architect Vincent Callebaut. The Gate residence will be built in the city's Heliopolis district and feature 1,000 apartments powered by solar panels, wind turbines and heating tubes. Living columns of vegetation that use the sun's rays to heat water and prevailing winds to cool living space will also be included.
To bring down the energy consumption of the building, we work above all with bioclimatization. That means that the building is sculpted according to the direction of the prevailing winds and according to the path of the sun. And then we brought that architecture to life using new technologies including wind turbines, geothermal systems, a huge photovoltaic roof and vertical gardens, all of those to bring down the energy footprint of the project.
The design includes a series of mega trees, frames arranged in the shape of chimneys and lined with plants to encourage a wind tunnel effect, which will help to cool the building without relying on electricity. The technique was widespread in ancient Egypt and is known in the country as malkaf.
The principle is simple. It's about bringing hot air from the outside, passing it underneath the foundations at around 20 meters below street level, where the earth has a roughly constant temperature of 15 degrees, and then this cooled air is then released into the patios or released into the apartment, and in this way we reduce the constant reliance on mechanical air conditioning.
The 4 levels of underground car parks, 1 level of supermarkets and 9 levels of residential housing benefit from a solar panelled roof, providing shade to the rooftop gardens. Water is heated naturally thanks to the sun's rays with purified water pumped through the tubes located the length of the roof to then be used domestically.
On the roof of the project, you have volcanoes containing solar tubes through which you could pass cold water, which is then heated naturally by the sun's rays and is then pumped straight into bathrooms and kitchens to have clean hot water without systematically having to rely on electricity.
At least 10% of the apartments in the building have already been sold. The architect believes the project will be delivered on time by 2019, despite recent instability in Cairo. Building is due to start in March. Valdi Karolsa, CCTV.
Let's look at commodity prices now, and oil fell towards $61 a barrel on Wednesday, failing to build on gains of more than 1% in the previous session. As analysts said, a recent rally was overblown. Oil prices have risen more than 35% since hitting an almost 6-year low of about $45 in January, with the ascent fueled by industry spending cutbacks and falling U.S. rig counts. And still ahead, Nigerian entrepreneur converts shipping containers into decent and affordable houses.
Having lived in 4 different African countries and with a diverse background, I cherish the personal as well as professional experiences I've had across the continent. It's this understanding of the place I call home that drives me to tell stories about its people, its needs, present and future.
There's just so much happening in Africa in terms of the way forward and development. It only brings positivity.
My place at CCTV Africa is about creating awareness around the realities of a continent that is indeed complex, vibrant, and has great potential.
Africa is my home. How it prospers, the challenges it faces, its people all matter to me because this is my future. I'm Famida Miller and I'm a reporter and anchor at CCTV Africa.
Ooh.
A Nigerian company is building houses out of used shipping containers in a new concept that minimizes building costs and can offer an alternative for millions of Nigerians seeking housing. On Grassroots tonight, we feature Tempo Housing Nigeria, a cargo texture solutions company that is behind the projects.
A shortage in building materials in Lagos has driven some business folk up the wall trying to find a solution. Tempo Housing Nigeria is a cargo textile solutions company that found some reprieve from the docks of the seaport. The company has chosen to use old shipping containers to create new and cheaper spaces.
Our solution compared to traditional concrete is about 25 to 30% cheaper than if you built the same structure using concrete. So like for like, this is assuming you use the same internal finishing materials, same sort of tiles, same sort of electrical, sanitary wares and the like. The key thing is that it's actually a lot quicker to implement as well. The same structure will take us several weeks compared to several months if you built with concrete.
In the spirit of making the containers tenable, the company has invested in insulators that are used to pad the panels of the container walls as a form of air conditioning given the heat in Lagos. Africa's largest economy is battling a range of housing issues, from inadequate mortgage facilities to expensive bank loans and even landlords who demand up to 5 years' rent from tenants. But despite the innovation, some are not planning to embrace it, raising the question of its longevity.
If you want to be wise, you go for concrete house. I can tell you that some generations cannot meet caravan.
Locals themselves are split on adopting the new style of housing.
This property belongs to my mother, but if this container is converted to a house, I will rent it or live in it, provided there won't be any problems.
If my visitor or if my family see me inside that kind of house, it's like, it will be like that I'm not okay at all.
Given that Nigeria is touted for having a growing middle class who can afford to buy or rent houses and apartments, more still needs to be done to find viable and innovative housing solutions to cater for all of its people. Leslie Mirungu, CCTV.
Let's look at the currencies now. Nigeria's central bank scrapped its bi-weekly currency auctions on Wednesday, and a market body said it would sell dollars only at 198 naira, a move that amounts to a de facto devaluation of the currency of Africa's biggest economy. With elections due in less than 6 weeks, the changes left the central bank reining its defense of the naira, on which it was spending more than $100 million a day while avoiding the politically unpalatable word devaluation. On Global Business tomorrow, we'll look at how Somalia's economy is faring after one of the last U.S. banks merchants withdrew remittance to Somalia operations. We'll also be looking at an increasing trend in the Western Cape, where women have taken to large-scale agriculture to promote food security in South Africa. And that's it on Global Business. To send your feedback to Global Business Africa at cctv.com. Visit us on Facebook. Our page is CCTV Africa. Also stay in touch with Global Business on Twitter using the handle at CCTV News Africa. I am Penina Karibe. Thanks for watching.